Hello everyone, welcome back to the Theta Arcana channel. Before we get into today's video topic, I'm going to try to make a habit of doing a short meditation beforehand each video. So before we get into it, it's the topic of the day. Let's get into the meditation. And we're just going to do just a few moments, just focusing on our breath, just relaxing, just being here in the present moment for a few, just to get our minds at ease, to get our bodies at ease, so that we can process and share this information in the best way possible. Alright, now that we're all hopefully a little bit more relaxed, comfortable, let's get into the topic for this video, which is the full moon that is happening right around now. It's peaking around noon Eastern Standard Time today, and is for Western astrology, the moon is in the sign of Aquarius, and for Vedic astrology it is in the sign of Capricorn. So those two systems are about one sign apart, so slightly different depending on what system you're using for how this full moon is directly affecting you and your birth chart. It could be having all kinds of various different effects and results of the energy right now. But instead of focusing on all the different signs and such, I'm going to more be focusing on what is the full moon and some related topics to that, what the moon represents, and related topics. So first we're going to talk about what is the full moon. The full moon is the last phase as the moon is waxing. This means the light is at its most radiant phase before the shadow starts to come back over the moon, before it starts to wane again. So it's the last phase of the moon considered. So this is why we call it full. It's fully radiant of the energy from the sun. And it also represents traditionally endings. It represents the end of a cycle. So not only is it the end of a lunar cycle, a lunar month, but it also represents the end of cycles within our lives. Whether it's something very small, something very large, things tend to shift during this time period. It can happen within 4 days before the full moon peaks. It can happen during the full moon. It can also happen within 4 days afterward. Those 4 days before and afterward are often called a shadow period of the moon, when it's either building up that energy or kind of getting away from it. But the energy is definitely still there. It's all surrounding that peak time of the full moon when it's at its most brilliant, radiant peak. So also we can talk about astrology and what is the moon, what the moon represents when we're speaking with astrology. And the moon represents our emotions and our mental aspects. So the mind and the emotions. It also represents dreams and sleep, because the average person is usually sleeping during the night at some point, more often than during the day. It's a time when, traditionally people couldn't do very much outside. Gardening and all the different labors and such and crafts was very difficult to do later at night when light was not available. So the nighttime was generally for doing, things indoors or resting, that sort of thing. So it represents also the hidden things, because it's of nighttime. It can be connected to the dark. So it can represent our shadow aspects somewhat, along with some other planets. Because it represents what is more unconscious, what is subconscious, what we are not as aware of. So whereas the sun radiates and enlightens, shows us everything, the moon in its various phases can either show us very little or more, depending on what phase it's in. And also the signs it's connecting in and how it's affecting us individually, of course. Also, so mental, emotional, dream, sleep, what is hidden, what is subconscious. It also definitely represents the divine feminine. So where the sun is often considered more masculine, divine masculine, the moon is often referred to as the divine feminine. And so it's getting in touch with that inner divine feminine that we may not be fully aware of, that we need to develop. So it also connects with our intuition, psychic powers, psychic gifts, anything that we are not fully aware of, that is not so in our face, the more subtle. So a lot of that is connected to the moon. So this moon is a very powerful time for releasing energy, the full moon. When it's the end of a cycle, and because it represents the end of a cycle and release, we can discover within ourselves what we need to release. Whether it's emotional or attached to our mental states, whether it has to do with our sleep, and it can be all kinds of other various different things too, depending on what the moon is, what sign it's in, what other planets it may be aspecting. So it definitely gets somewhat complicated if we look at it in an astrological way. But otherwise, we can just look at it as a time period of releasing what no longer serves us, what we no longer need for our highest and best, for our spiritual journey, what needs to be let go of so that we may move forward. And just like the ends, it also represents like the ends of any kind of projects, anything we've been putting energy towards, anything we have been working towards, trying to manifest. This is often a time around the full moon when those projects and goals can often come to fruition. Results can often be seen, felt, experienced, etc. around this time period as well. So it was a very powerful time for anyone, whether you are doing witchcraft or you just feel spiritual, or and just even the average person who doesn't resonate at all with these other things. Is just a very powerful time to be consciously aware of, so that we can pay attention to what needs to be released. Even if we don't look at it in an astrological way, just paying attention to what in your life needs to go, what needs to change, what can be released, so that we can start working towards bringing in the new energy with the new moon in 2 weeks. So the full moon, it happens around once a month. It's not perfect, but every year we have around 12 lunar cycles, so 12 full moons. And each full moon is connecting with a different star sign. So each time it comes back to that full cycle, it's connecting with a different zodiac constellation. And it just keeps going around the circle over and over again. So all this energy is very much about cycles. The cycles of the macrocosm are all up in space, the celestial, and the cycles of the microcosm within our individual self, and then everything in between, humanity, and all of that. So we're going to see lots of different changes and just things being released right now, things that are no longer serving the individual, humanity, the entire cosmos. And the more we pay attention to these things, the more we're going to notice these changes happening. Now, a lot of people who practice witchcraft and are more into spirituality and such will use this time period to do various different types of rituals, manifesting, any kind of magic will be more powerful during this time period, basically. And we're also going to talk about why that is. But basically, you can either choose to do, conscious rituals, spell work, magic, anything like that, manifesting, or you don't have to. It's totally up to you. Some people will, some people will not. So either you can work with the energy and try to see what you can make out of it, try to see what you can accomplish with it, or you can just simply pay attention to it. Just pay attention to how it makes you feel, how this full moon is influencing your life directly, how it's influencing those around you, your relationships, your career, this, that. It's going to affect all kinds of different aspects of life, basically, whether it's a little bit or a lot. There is definitely at least some influence from this heavenly body. And really we can talk a little bit about why that is. Why does the moon in general influence us at all? And if you're aware of the oceans, then we have tides, which is the water is being pulled back and forth each day. And this is because of this giant celestial body that is flying around us in space. So while the Earth is rotating on its axis, we have the moon rotating around us, around the Earth. And while it's doing this, the gravitational pull of this is affecting the water of the planet. These gigantic oceans, these massive amounts of water are being pulled and pushed just because the moon is just moving around. It's that powerful. And if you're aware of the human biology at all, then I always forget the exact number, but the human body is over 60% water. And even beyond water, there are just tons of different chemicals within the body, different kinds of fluid and liquid, lubricating and doing this and that, and just the massive amount of water that's in us. So when we get to certain periods of time, like the full moon and the new moon, especially those two, and the moon is considered to be kind of at its most influential points. Especially the full moon, all of these liquids, all of this water and these chemicals get drawn up to the head. Just like the moon is affecting the tides and is able to pull those gigantic oceans and push them and just move them, it's doing the exact same thing to our biochemistry and our biological structure. All that fluid within us is getting affected by the gravity and gets pulled up into our head, into our brain. So what this does is it has various different effects on everybody, but it generally heightens and intensifies experiences, whether it's the senses or perception or mental states. It has the ability to influence and heighten all of these things. So if an individual is fairly balanced and peaceful doing fairly well, fairly healthy, not very stressed or very anxious, then the full moon may have a little effect on them, a little noticeable effect. It may just heighten that. It may just turn that happiness into bliss. It just may make them a little bit more carefree, more loving, more peaceful. It'll just take everything kind of to the next level. So alternately, if we talk about someone who is a little bit more imbalanced, they're dealing more with stress, with depression, with mania, with various different types of mental instability. Any kind of chemicals are imbalanced, energy is imbalanced, and the full moon also has the potential to heighten those things, to help us to become more aware of them. So whereas on an average day we may be able to ignore them, kind of hide from them, escape from those things, during the full moon time it gets much more difficult to do those things. We are naturally, if we are trying to heal ourselves, to evolve, to become more mindful, we're going to naturally just become more consciously aware of all these things. Any imbalance that's in the system, whether the physical or spiritual body, we're likely to become more consciously aware of it. So this is all overall a very helpful, very healthy thing, as long as we are consciously aware of it and we can learn from it. The full moon will show us what we need to work on and basically how to work on it, what we need to do to change this, what we need to do to heal it, to transmute it, to let it go, to decide what is no longer serving us and our spiritual journey. So overall, it's very helpful elements to the moon, and especially the full moon energy. The more consciously aware we are of it, the more helpful it can be. The more consciously aware of it, the less it has the ability to influence us, especially causing more imbalance, more instability. That's where we get the term lunacy, and such terms like that is, for a lot of people, the full moon can make things just more intense. If they're already a little bit out of control, then things can blow completely out of control. So it really depends on how consciously aware of ourselves we are and of the surroundings, from our immediate surroundings to the celestial surroundings. It's just a matter of how consciously aware are we of these events happening, the microcosm, the macrocosm, and all of it connected. So by staying very consciously aware of it, by paying attention to thoughts we're having, to feelings, to situations that have been ongoing, these things can be released, can be transformed during this time period. So a very powerful time period right now that we are in. Again, this happens almost once a month. It's just a cycle that is here to help us, to teach us. And the more consciously aware of it we are, the less it's going to affect us in a harmful way. So do your best to pay attention, be consciously aware, going about your day, just reminding yourself that there might be things that need to be dealt with. We don't want to just ignore them, just keep on doing this or doing that, without becoming more consciously aware of how it's affecting us, how it's affecting those around us, and how those things are affecting us as well. It's very much an in and out relationship, goes both ways. So I hope everyone has a beautiful full moon, and whether you do a ritual or not, full moon blessings to you. Thank you. Take care.